Hello everyone, welcome back to my history class. Today we are moving into one of the most powerful and turning point chapters of Indian history, that is Delhi Sultans. This is where India's capital Delhi starts to rise as a center of power. We will see how small rulers turned Delhi into an empire, how different sultans ruled it, and how their system of administration, economy and military shaped the foundation for future empires, including the Mughals. So let's begin this journey from garrison town to great. You might remember from our last chapter, the places like the Kaveri Delta became early centers of kingdoms. But in those times, Delhi wasn't yet famous. It was only around the 12th century that Delhi began to rise in importance. The Tomara Rajput first made it their capital, and then they were defeated by Chauhans of Ajmer. Under these two dynasties, Delhi became an important trade and commercial center, and the rich Jaina merchants lived there and built temples and coins minted in Delhi, called Dilliwal, circulated widely. But Delhi's real transformation from a city to a capital controlling vast regions began with Delhi Sultans in the early 13th century. There are 5 dynasties in the Delhi Sultanate, that is Slave dynasty, Khalji dynasty, and Tughlaq dynasty, Sayyid dynasty and Lodi dynasty. Together they ruled for over 300 years, making Delhi the heart of North Indian politics. Now, historians have found coins, inscriptions and architecture from this period, but the most detailed information comes from Persian histories called Tawarikh. These were written by learned men, that is secretaries, administrators, poets and scholars who lived mostly in Delhi's royal court. They wrote about events, gave advice to rulers and always talked about justice, good governance and the ideal king. But remember, these writers had their own biases. They lived in cities, not villages. They wrote hoping for royal rewards and they believed in the fixed social order where birth and gender decided status. So sometimes they didn't like things that went against these ideas, like when a woman became rural. One of the most famous example was Razia Sultan, daughter of Iltutmish. In 1236, she became a sultan, the only woman ever to rule the Delhi Sultanate. Even the chronicle, Minhaj-i-Siraj admitted she was intelligent and capable, more than her brothers, but he couldn't accept a woman as a ruler. He wrote that God made women subordinate to men, so how could she rule? This shows how society at that time was not ready for women in power. Nobles revolted against her independence and she was removed from the throne in 1240. But Razia's story stands as a symbol of strength and leadership, much ahead of her time. In the early 13th century, the Delhi Sultanate was just a small kingdom, a few fortified towns and controlled by soldiers. These were called as garrison towns. The sultans didn't have full control over the countryside. They depended on tax, tribute and plunder to feed their armies. It was also difficult to control distant places like Bengal or Sindh from Delhi. The communication was weak and local governors often rebelled. And to make things worse, the Mongols from the northwest were constantly attacking India. So Delhi's early rulers, especially Balban, Alauddin Khalji, Muhammad Tughlaq, had to fight hard just to survive and expand. Delhi's expansion happened in 2 stages. That is, first one is internal frontiers. The sultans expanded inside North India, especially the Ganga Yamuna Dho. They cleared forest, forced out local tribes and hunter-gatherers and gave land to farmers. This helped to strengthen agriculture and increased revenue. New towns and forts were built to protect trade routes. And second one is external frontiers. That is, the next expansion was towards the south under the Alauddin Khalji and later Muhammad Tughlaq. They sent armies to capture rich southern kingdoms and returned with elephants, horses, slaves and gold. By the end of Tughlaq's rule, nearly 150 years after it began, the Delhi Sultanate had spread over a large part of India, but control wasn't always strong. It depended on the ruler's strength, not just the army's reach. During this period, many mosques were built. The mosque is where Muslims prayed together, facing Mecca, the holy city. In India, that direction is west, okay? The main mosque was called the Jama Masjid. The congregational mosque where the Friday sermon was read by an imam. The Kubda was read in the Sultan's name, symbolizing his authority and legitimacy as ruler. So even religion was connected to governance and state power. Let's take a look at how Khaljis and Tughlaqs ruled. Because they built the strongest administrative system of the Delhi Sultanate. To govern such a vast empire, they needed loyal officers and not every noble could be trusted. So, rulers like Iltutmish began appointing special slaves known as Bandagan to important posts. They were trained, loyal and totally dependent on Sultan. The Khaljis and Tughlaqs continued this system and also promoted people of humble background to high ranks. But this created a problem because every new Sultan brought his own loyal officers, leading to conflict between old and new nobility. They also followed a system called Ikta system. Each province was given to a Mukti or Iqadar, who collected revenue, maintained law and order, and led military campaigns. In return, he got a share of the taxes as his salary. But to prevent misuse, rulers like Alauddin Khalji and Muhammad Tughlaq made the Iqdars non-hereditary and kept them rotating. They also appointed accountants to check revenues and ensuring no one became too powerful. And there were the types of taxes. The first one is cultivation called kharaj and amounting to about 50% of peasant produce, and also for cattle and the houses. This is the period when Mongols were attacked to India. Okay, in that, the Alauddin Khalji faced continuous Mongol invasion and internal revolts. To defend Delhi, he built a new fortified city called Siri and raised a huge standing army. To feed this army, he taxed the lands between the Ganga and Yamuna at nearly 50% of produce. And instead of paying soldiers with the land, he paid them cash salaries, a new system. But when soldiers began spending money in Delhi's market, price started to rise. So Alauddin introduced price control to fixing rates for grains, clothes, horses and other goods. Traders had to sell at fixed prices and those who cheated were punished. This made Delhi's market stable and good affordable. Even historians praised Alauddin for his efficient administration and strong defense against the Mongols. After Alauddin came Muhammad Tughlaq, one of the most ambitious ruler but also known for his strange experiments. He wanted to expand his empire beyond India, even planning his invasion of Mongol lands in Central Asia. He raised a huge army, but to pay them he increased taxes, right when the region was hit by famine. He also moved his capital from Delhi to Daulatabad in the south, hoping to control the Deccan better. But this shift caused great hardship to the people, who were forced to move hundreds of kilometers. His most famous move was introducing token currency, that is, the coins made of cheap metal like copper used instead of silver and gold. But the people didn't trust it. They started making fake coins at home. Finally, Tughlaq had to cancel the scheme and take all those coins back. So, while his ideas were ahead of his time, they faced failure because of poor planning and timing. After Tughlaqs came the Sayyids land Lodhis. They ruled from Delhi and Agra till the early 16th century. But by this time, the Sultan's power had declined. The regional states like Bengal, Gujarat, Malwa and Rajasthan had become independent. Then came Sher Shah Suri, one of the most remarkable ruler. He defeated the Mughal Empire Humayun and established his own short-lived Sur dynasty. But in just 5 years, Sher Shah reformed administration, revenue and road so efficiently that Akbar later adopted his system for the Mughal Empire. That's why Sher Shah is remarked as a ruler who rebuilt governance on strong foundation. So that's it for today's class. In the next class, we will move to the Mughal Empire and see how it built on the foundation laid by the Delhi Sultans. If you like this lecture, don't forget to like, share and subscribe.